Hello and welcome to, my name is Julie Masters and welcome to my webinar on how to build an influencer brand. Aria very kindly asked me to speak to you for the next 45 minutes as part of their Advantage program. So we're going to be going through everything that it takes to build an influencer brand, how to become an authority. We're going to be looking at the influencer code. We're going to be doing some core practical things. And hopefully we're going to be getting you out there as influencers in your space. So, all right, let's kick off. Slide number 1. So what makes an influencer? What makes an influencer? I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this for about 15 years. And when I first started out, nobody was using that word, influencer. Nobody was using the term thought leader. No one was using the term authority. No one had, probably much heard of Facebook at that point either. Whereas if you look now it's everywhere, right? Now there's, you can become a hero online in 140 characters or less. There's dancing cats, there's Donald Trump, there's everything in between. So for the purpose of today, how I want to define being an influencer is I want to define it as the go-to authority in your space. Go-to authority in your space. So just have a think about, if you were the go-to authority in your space, which for you guys is more like a geographic space, right? If you were, would you get more opportunities? Would you get better quality talent as part of your team? Would you start attracting rather than chasing new clients, new vendors? And I think that the answer to all those questions, in my experience at least, is yes. So job number 1 that I want you to do when you get off this webinar is I want you to sit down, I want you to write out the top 5 people that you consider to be go-to experts in their space. It doesn't have to be real estate, it can be any topic you like. And I want you to have a look at them. Just spend 15 minutes. Go look at them. Why? Why do you consider them to be a go-to expert? What do they do? How do they do it? What space do they own? What language do they use? What platforms are they on? What is it that caught your attention? I want you to get really forensic about that, because just that exercise alone is going to tell you so much about what makes an influencer. So much. Okay, so what makes a go-to authority in your space? I want you to think about that for a second. But before we get into it, I want to do a bit of a quick pop quiz. So, slide number 1. I want you to tell me who that is. You can't actually physically tell me, but just have a think. In your head, who's that? All right, next. I'm not going to leave that one on for long because I'm fairly sure most of you know who that is. So we're going to go to our next one. Who's the next one? And our final one. All right, enough already. Before we go any further, I'm fairly sure that you know you've been set up for this one. So my guess, every time I do this, my guess is that most of you had no clue who the first one was, and every clue who the second one was. You knew the second one was Oprah and Steve Jobs, right? So who were the first ones? Well, the first one that you saw is a lady called Susan Wojcicki. Now, Susan Wojcicki is the CEO of YouTube, which makes her possibly the most powerful woman in media at this point in time. But you have no idea who she is. The second person you saw, that's Tim Berners-Lee. Now, Tim Berners-Lee is the reason that you and I are talking today. Tim Berners-Lee is the reason that Steve Jobs had a job. Tim Berners-Lee invented the internet. And yet you probably, I'm guessing, had no clue who they were. So why is that? And what does that tell us about building an influencer brand? Well, the first thing that it tells us is it tells us what influence is not. It tells us that influence is not how many years you've been doing something. It tells us that influence is not how many dollars you have in your bank account. It also tells us that influence isn't aggression, and it's not being an extrovert, and it's not being the loudest person. Because those people and a lot of the other influencers I work with, they're mainly introverts. So they're not the loudest person in the room. So that's what being an influencer, creating an influencer brand is not. What is it? And how do you do it? And how do you replicate it time and time again at scale? Before I go there, and I'll keep saying that before I go there, I want to introduce something else into the conversation, because it's probably the most pivotal thing that's shifted over the past 10, 15 years that's going to make the largest amount of difference if you can harness it. And that's this. I would put it to you that we are entering a new age of influence at the moment, and we're right at the beginnings, where for the first time in human history, literally, humans are more powerful than governments, than the media, and than brands. And as a result of that, we are able to connect, engage, and influence en masse in terrifyingly short periods of time. And why is that? That's because of the internet, that's because of digital. Digital has changed the game of attention. Trust in a brand these days is around about 35%, whereas trust in an individual is at 65%. So we would literally rather take advice from a random person on the internet, and trust me, I'm a new mum. Things I Google at 2 a.m, why won't my baby stop crying, are insane. We would literally rather trust the random on the internet than we would the World Health Organization, which is insane, right? And because of this shift, the noise has gone up, and you'll all have noticed this. Just the sheer amount of crowdedness and noise has gone through the roof. It's completely disrupted my industry. When I first started out, only a select few people got a stage, and only a select few people got a voice, and only a select few people got to, got a TV show. Now that's gone. There are more blogs launched every day than there are newspapers in the world. If you want your own TV channel, 30 seconds, go start a YouTube channel. If you want your own radio show, 30 seconds, start a podcast. If you want to start a blog, you can do that. You can pretty much get a following around yourself in a very short period of time, thing that previously took brands and governments millions of dollars and tens of years to do. So humans are now more powerful, are now the most powerful force on the planet. So here's another example. Next slide. Justin Bieber. Now, I don't think many of you are going to admit to knowing who Justin Bieber is. However, I will. So Justin Bieber, on one channel, on one social media channel, there are now 52 social media channels at last count, but just on one, on Twitter, Justin Bieber has 100 million followers, 100 million. President Obama, or ex-President Obama, has 90 million. Donald Trump, 30 million. In the middle, now here's the bit that's more interesting. In the middle, CNN, most powerful brand, media brand in the world, 50 million. So if you extrapolate that out a little bit, what we're essentially saying is that Justin Bieber, if he wanted to, could spread an idea, a movement, a conversation, a product, or a brand faster than the most powerful media channel on the planet. So human beings, more powerful than the media. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Next slide. Not only are human beings more powerful than the media, we're also more powerful than brands now. And this, for you in a real estate business, is the number one thing that I think you need to be focused on in the coming years. 96% of all content that you engage with, and bear in mind we spend 51% of our time engaging with online content in one way, shape or form. We get most of our information, we make most of our buying decisions now as a result of the content that we consume. But 96% of it has no relationship with a brand, nothing to do with a brand at all. So we would spend, as companies, as professionals, we would spend $50 billion a year on branding, marketing, and advertising. And no one's looking. No one's looking anymore. 96% of our attention is with people and stories. We don't follow brands, we follow people. We don't trust brands anymore. We don't trust the media anymore. We trust people. We don't follow branded messages anymore or advertising. We follow stories. And we're going to get into that a lot more today. So if you're looking for untapped potential and the new competitive advantage, in my opinion, it is this. You need to become the go-to authority in your space. You need to become the influencer in your space. And that is going to attract to you the lion's share of opportunities and talent in this brand new age of influence. All right, let's get into it. So over the past 20 years, I've worked with some of the world's leading thought leaders, authorities, and influencers. And during that time, I have broken down some common traits. And I've broken it down into 7 key factors, all of which I would call the influencer code. Now, we've only got 45 minutes today, so we're going to go through 5. We're going to pick 5 of those. And those 5 are these. We're going to do clarity, we're going to do contribution, we're going to do content, collaboration, and we're going to do consistency. Now, are you ready? Because this is the bit where you're going to need to have a pen and paper ready, and I'm going to be getting you to do some things. So, number 1, clarity. Clarity. Back in the day when I first started out, you could own, I think I said before, you could own a massive space. There weren't many people who had a voice. There weren't many platforms. You could be the guru of real estate. You could be the guru of leadership. You could be the guru of health and well-being, of the cooking world. No longer. There is too much noise now. You cannot stand out trying to own what we would call a macro space, which is a large space. So what clarity means is you need to get hyper-specialized about the space that you want to own. Those are the people who are cutting through the noise now, the hyper-specialists. Next slide. The people that are owning their space, they're people who are micro-authorities. Now, micro-authorities, the thing about micro-authority is you're actually talking to somebody. You're so specialist that you can cut through and capture somebody's attention, because somebody will look up and go, oh, that's me. They're talking directly to me. Now, micro-authorities get 4 times more comments on social media, 4 times more engagement on social media than macro-authorities, but people who are too generalist in their targeting. So how do you figure out what your micro-authority is? First of all, I've got a job for you. Again, second job, when you get off this webinar, I want you to find somebody that you trust, but that maybe doesn't know what you do, or couldn't give you a defined answer about what you do. And I want you to get them to Google you. Google your name. Give them 5 minutes and then have them tell you what your specialty is. Have them tell you what space you own. And I want you to be looking for 3 things. Firstly, fingers crossed they can find you. Number 1, can they find you? Are you on page 1? Do you own your name? Number 2, is it clear that you work in real estate? Should hopefully be a no-brainer. But number 3, what space do you own within real estate? What space do you own within real estate? Is it really obvious who you're targeting specifically? Which leads us on to the next question. How do you figure out who to target specifically? So the next slide, you need to check in on your influence intersection, which is a very posh and complicated way of saying, I want you to figure out what your space is. And so you do that by, you take one area where you have mastery and experience, and you take another area where you have mastery and experience, and you combine those 2 areas, and that space in the middle, that's the space that only you can own. So I'll give you an example. Jamie Oliver. He obviously understood the world of cooking. He understood the chef world. Now at that point, there was a lot of chefs out there in the media, but they were all very high-end, kind of Michelin-starred French cuisine chefs. And so he came in and he overlaid it with something else that he knew, which was your everyday home and a young family. And he took everything he had learned from here and he combined it with everything that he knew about that. And that space in the middle, that's what made him stand out. That's a space that only he could own. Another example, Steve Jobs took his mastery and experience in the computing world, and at that point it was the Microsofts, the IBMs, very serious computer business. And he took his passion and his background in creativity, in innovation. And that space, that was the space that only he could own. So I want you to have a think, what is the space that only you can own? What is a space that's going to make you stand out from the noise? Now, the obvious part of this is you've got to make sure there's potential there. It's all very well and good saying, you know, I'm an expert at computer games and I'm also, you know, a really great real estate agent. That space in the middle, vendors who love computer games, might not be the right target market. So you need to check that there's potential there. But if you can find a space with potential that you can own, that's a gold mine. You should be going straight after that. So get clear on the space that you want to own and dive straight into that one. I love this quote. It's not actually by Elon Musk, weirdly enough. It's by Elon Musk's now ex-wife, Justine Musk. when asked, so she was there the whole way through his rise to prominence, and someone asked her what was the secret to his success. And she said this, she said, choose one thing and become a master of it, choose a second thing and become a master of that. So Elon Musk, engineering, and now business, cars. That's a space that only he owns. I can't think of anybody else that owns that. So find two worlds, combine them, make sure there's the potential there for you. Next one, contribution. I want you to write this down. Write this down, please. The future belongs to those that out-contribute, not those that outspend. Future belongs to those that out-contribute, not those that outspend. And we have come from decades and decades of the strategy of outspending and outshouting. Anyone that's seen any adverts recently, you understand the outshouting part of that. And in this day and age, you cannot outspend your competitors anymore because there's too many channels that are far more effective that are free. So you can't outspend. You also can't outshout. A volume strategy is not going to work anymore. You need to out-contribute. You need to provide more value to your target market than anybody else in your space more consistently. So you out-contribute, not outspend. So what does out-contributing look like? What does contribution mean? So to contribute is to provide above and beyond what's expected. Second part of contribution is that it has to be about me and not about you. So your communication has to be about me, not about you. So I get countless emails. I'm on so many newsletter lists, and it kills me the amount of newsletters that I get that talks about, it's our 10-year anniversary and such has changed jobs and we've been in business this long, we've been busy, here's what we've been doing. The thing that all of that has in common, it has no cut through because it's not about me. There's nothing in it for me. And I have such a limited bandwidth now, such a limited attention span. I think human attention span has just dropped below a goldfish. It's now 7 seconds. So you want to get my attention, make it about me. Make it about me. I'm going to tell you a story. When I had a talent management agency for many years, and we had offices here in Sydney. We also had offices in America. And when we were going to launch into America, we had a bit of a dilemma on our hands, and that was that our competitors in America, they had a lot more money than we did. And a lot of you submitted questions before this webinar about how do I, there's all these players that have been in it forever and they've got more money and they've got more staff and they've got more resources and yes and yes and yes and yes. And how do I compete? Well, you're in the best time possible to compete because, as I mentioned, the most powerful channels are for free. So we were like, okay, we can't outspend these people. These are literally people who have lunch with the Clintons. We can't outspend them. But I'll tell you what we can do. We can out-contribute them. And so what we did was we went to our target market and we said, what are your professional challenges right now? What are you struggling with? Where would you like some assistance, support, some help, some tools? And they came back and they answered our questions. And so we went out to all the experts we had in our network and we recorded a series of short videos. And that's how we launched into the States. We did a 12-week video program once a week. Nothing to do with our brand, no ask, no information about us, just here is something for you. We wanted to contribute to your world. We got more impact with that launch strategy than we would ever have done if we'd have tried to outspend or outshout the other people, the dominant people in the marketplace. And it cost us relatively nothing. So out-contribute. Next, one of the things with salespeople that I know to be true, having been a salesperson, having run teams of salespeople, is that we have a nasty habit of collecting contacts. It's like the new baseball cards, the baseball cards of the new age, where you're like, who have you got? Have I got that one? I'm going to get that one. I'll swap you for that one. And we're on LinkedIn, we're getting 50 contacts a day and we're inviting people to connect and our network's growing and growing and growing. We feel really good about ourselves. And essentially all we've done is collected a bunch of human beings. Now, if I got you to think in your head about your total reach, which is actually a really good exercise to do, by the way. How many contacts have you got on all your social media channels? How many contacts have you got on your phone? How many contacts have you got in your database? Just a rough guess in your head. Just try and have a number in your head. Now, there are about 750 people registered for this webinar. On average, most of us have between 500 and 1,000 people in our network. So that means the combined reach of this community this community on this webinar right now, is somewhere between 500,000 and 750,000 people. Now that's crazy. But here's the crazy bit. When was the last time you engaged with any of them? When was the last time you contributed? When was the last time you asked a question? And this is the important bit. When was the last time you got a response? Because that's the true form of engagement. Influence, if you want a simple definition, influence is the ability to be able to say, look over there, and have somebody engaged enough to look. A brand has become what they look at. Branding now means nothing without influence. So, I'm going to tell you another quick story just to highlight the difference between collecting and engaging. I was looking for a house recently. My family and I, we weren't sure whether we were going to buy or we were going to rent, and so we went to an awful lot of open homes. And you know, you go to an open home and somebody stands in the doorway and they won't let you through. It's like a game of dodge. They won't let you through until you've answered some core questions on their clipboard, or if they're really snazzy, on an iPad. And name, and I give them my name and email address, and I inwardly die and give them my email address, and then they stand aside and they'll let me come through. And then what happens? 2 days later, 3 days later, I get a deluge of emails in my inbox to no one, from no one, with a bunch of properties that I've probably already found online. So how would it be different? How would it be different? How would it be different if, let's just say, I showed up to that open home, and name, yes, email address, yes, and then they asked me a question, and they said, just out of curiosity, why are you looking for a property? Why are you looking for somewhere to live? Is it because you have a growing family and you're looking for more space? Is it because you're a professional couple and you just love this area? Is it because you're a single person and you're looking for a space that better suits you? Or are you a downsizer? So you're basically looking to take your home and, you know, reduce your floor plan. I would answer that question. I'd be a bit curious. I'd answer the question. They'd let me through. And then 2 days later, this is the interesting part. 2 days, what if I got an email saying, Dear Julie, to me, Dear Julie, I noticed you met a member of my team this weekend. I hope that, you know, the grueling task of going through open homes worked out well for you. They happened to mention to me that you have a growing family and you're looking at moving to Clovelly. Here are some things that might be helpful to that journey for you. I wish you the very best of luck. Here are parks in the local area that you might not know of. Here's places to take your kids during the school holidays. Here's some classes, some events that are going on. Here are some cafes that work really well if you've got young children that have got toys and areas for them to play. Now, I would have read that email and I would have remembered that person, or at least that brand, and that would have got cut through. So who's the person in your area that specializes in apartments? Who's the person in your area that specializes in growing families? Who's the person in your area that specializes in downsizers? How do you out-contribute? If that's your space, how do you out-contribute anybody else? And how do you engage rather than collect? I want you to have a look at your meetings also. What questions are you asking your teams in those weekly meetings? I'm assuming you have weekly meetings about the people that they've met, about the questions that they got asked. This is all valuable intel that you should be taking in and keeping in some kind of internal resource. So, to support you with that, because it's really important to know where the eyes and the ears are of the target market we're looking to reach. So what I want you to do is another task for you at some point today, and this will only be as effective as it is that you contribute and you take part. And if we do it well, if we do it together, this could be really interesting. I want you to go on to one of your networks, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you think like you have the most amount of traction right now. And I want you to ask this question: who do you follow online and why? Now, you can say anything else. You can say, you know, I did a webinar today about influencing in a new digital age, and I'm really curious. Who do you follow online and why? Whatever you do, just ask that question in one way, shape or form. And I want you to hashtag. So for those of you who don't know hashtags, it's basically just the hash symbol with some words, no spaces. Julie Masters Webinar. Hashtag Julie Masters Webinar. And then I want you to pay attention to what happens. Because what you'll get is valuable intel from your network around who they're looking at, why they're looking at that person, what's compelling about that person. You're going to learn so much about the type of stories, the type of content, the type of contribution that your target market is looking for. And if you put the hashtag, you can also check each other's. So we can search, and I'm looking over at Ali at the moment, and we might even be able to get all of that together for you and send it out to you so that you can learn from each other's networks. Because let's face it, the unique space that you own, hopefully, if you're doing it well, it's all going to be different. So you may as well learn from each other. So that's my next task for you. Who do you follow online and why? Okay, embrace your dark side. Sounds ominous, right? It's not that ominous. Basically, embracing your dark side is probably one of the most underused tools I see in influence. And it's all about dark social. Now, dark social is any form of sharing that doesn't take place on a public platform. So when you see something interesting on Facebook or on Instagram and you press share and you just shoot it out to all of your contacts. Dark social is where you take that thing that you found interesting, you take that link to an article, to a video, to a trends report, whatever it is, and you share it with one person directly, either through a text message, through instant messenger, or through email. You say, hey, John, I saw this, I thought you might find it really interesting. Now I can tell you that there's at least 3 people just this morning that would have heard from me in that way. And if you think about it, if someone shared that way with you, what are you going to do? You're going to open it because somebody you know or trust or respect has said that something's interesting. Dark social is 7 times more powerful than social. 7 times more powerful, 7 times more engaging. And for those of you who mentioned, there was a couple of questions, I know you all submitted questions beforehand, there was a couple of questions about baby boomers. Now, dark social is, I think it's 50% of baby boomers only share on dark social, only use dark social. So if baby boomers is your market, you need to do this stuff. You need to embrace dark social. You need to embrace your dark side. And you do that by setting an hour aside every week, figuring out where you're going to look. Are there certain blogs? Are there certain places where you can find content that would be of interest to that target market, and sharing it with specific people? So an hour a week, embracing your dark side, an hour a week. Sounds so simple, is done so infrequently, and is 7 times more powerful than anything else I will tell you today from a channel perspective. Okay, so that's contribution. Next slide. Well, now we're going to look at content. I'm going to look at content. So if you're going to embrace your dark side, if you're going to out-contribute, if you're going to do all these things, you're going to need to either find or create epic content. So content is, I think, as I said before, 51% of our time is spent consuming content right now. So if you're not in the content game, in the words of Gary Vaynerchuk, then you need to get out of town, because it is the only thing that's getting cut through at the moment. So what does compelling content look like? I'm going to play you a quick video just so that we can get into the headspace of compelling content, and then I'm going to break that down afterwards.
I just don't do anything that the normal real estate agent does. I like being a real person. I like going into a house and just sitting down and just talking to people about their life first, about their story, about what they're about. Real estate isn't a job to me, it's lifestyle. If I can sit and talk to people all day and in the meantime sell a home and make a great result for my clients, then I'm happy.
Bringing down the house like a hurricane. Don't stop, don't drop for anyone. Won't shake, won't break, she's having fun. Raise rooms, right through, down to the frames. Moves fast, kicks ass, she's taking names. One hit, that's it, she wins again. We're blown away, 'cause she's a hurricane.
She sold a couple of houses for us, which is what she like at anything. And if I ring her, she rings me back that day. She's a local girl, a family girl. She's got little boys.
And I'll be talking to my personal assistant and I'll just ask her a whole heap of questions. And then he listens. Mum, why haven't you done an open home at 20 Barker Street yet? Why isn't it sold? There's no sold sticker on the sign.
Melita has sold 8 properties of ours. She's one of my best friends. Melita works on the clock. Sometimes she'll be calling us up at 10 o'clock at night.
Our quickest sale was 3 days, and the longest we've had our houses on the market out of 8 in total has been 3 weeks.
She's the best real estate person I've ever had any contact with. She's sold 5 properties for us in my family. I like her honesty, her openness, her reliability. What Melita says she will do, she does.
A lot of my family live on farms in the Lockie Valley. I just love Toowoomba. I love the growth of Toowoomba. I love the parks. I love the trees, the tree-lined streets. It's just a beautiful place to live.
All the qualities that you look for in a person, not just a real estate agent.
Being genuine and just telling the truth and just being compassionate towards your client, because a lot of people have a story behind why they're selling a home.
Lots of people sell their homes for different reasons. I had to sell mine because my husband left. 16 years of marriage and selling the kids' home with a built-in pool and 5 bedrooms. Yeah, it was very hard. She was amazing. She was kind, she was considerate, she was thoughtful, she helped me clean, she helped me change things around. Nothing happened in an open house. She'd come and buy cupcakes the next day and have a coffee with me just to cheer me up, and we've been friends ever since. I ended up getting...
All right, I'm guessing some of you would know who she is. For those of you who don't know who she is, that's, well, you will do if you just watched it, that's Melita Bell. And I used that video because I think it's an incredible example of epic storytelling. So one of the other questions that was asked prior to this webinar was, how do I stand out in a new age, in this new age of influence? How do I, with all the digital noise, how do I stand out? And my simple answer to that question is this: the future belongs to epic storytellers. You know, you're not competing anymore with the people that you think you're competing with. You are now competing with every single thing on the internet, every single thing. And if you look at what got your attention, so I just mentally go back to the beginning of the day and everything that just caught your attention, everything that you bothered to read, I guarantee you the vast majority of it would be epic stories, would be storytelling in some way, shape or form. Now the thing about storytelling is that we are hardwired for story as human beings. I've worked in storytelling in one way, shape or form my entire life, and what I love about storytelling is it is the only way to create emotional connection. Now for you guys, emotional connection is key, because trust does not happen without emotional connection. So there's only one way to do that, and that is through storytelling, because what happens, literally from a scientific point of view, from a neurochemistry point of view, is you tell me a story. What I do is I go into my brain and I'm like, okay, well, how would I feel? I make myself the lead character of that story automatically. How would I feel? What would I have done then? How would I have felt then? All of a sudden I'm feeling everything that you felt. Now that's called empathy, and empathy is the only way that we connect as human beings. So if you want to develop trust, if you want to develop a connection quickly, storytelling is the way that you're going to get that done. So what makes a compelling story? I'd spent a bit of time researching before doing this actually, and I've done a few other presentations recently for real estate industry, and what I found when I looked through all of the content that I could find on real estate was there was a few key factors to compelling storytelling, and funnily enough they're the same key factors to epic storytelling anywhere. And that is, number one, epic storytelling is personal. It's personal. I was watching a video by one real estate agent, and he was walking around this beautiful home in Double Bay, I think it was. And he was talking about, you know, he looked fabulous in a suit. He was talking about the pool room, and he was talking about the sauna, and you could tell that that was his kind of home. You know, you could see that he was really passionate about this home, really enthusiastic about this home, that this was personal to him. We have access to so many stories. You know, we can smell out an authentic story. A powerful story is one which is personal. It's about you. It's where you actually feel passionate about something, or it happened to somebody else that you know and you're able to tell it in a passionate way. So it's personal. And you would have seen on that Melita video, like, that was personal to her, right? That felt personal to her. It was her town. It's the families that she spends her time with. It's her own family. It's her son. So hugely personal. Personal stories get the most amount of cut through. Secondly, it needs to be relevant. So I'm talking about languaging here. Finding the language that appeals to your target market. There's this thing called charismatic language, and charismatic language, every target market has different charismatic language. And if you look at what your own charismatic language is, it's certain words that when used, they catch your attention. Certain words. So different target markets have different words. I noticed when I looked through Melita's Facebook feed, there was a property up there, I think it was a farm, and rather than the address, I don't know why everybody uses street address as titles, by the way, I don't understand it. Rather than the street address, it said, are you looking for, it was something like, are you looking for a home for your family to grow old on? It was something like that. And it had 66 comments, 66. And most of those comments were people tagging other people in. So the amplification effect of that was massive, huge. And that's because it was relevant. She made it relevant. She said something that was going to catch my attention as her target market. So we've got personal, we've got relevant. The last one is emotive. Are you doing something that's going to spark some emotions in me? Are you telling a story that's emotive? You'll notice again on the Melita video, the lady who talked about her husband having left her in the situation she was in and how Melita dealt with that, coming around, cupcakes and coffee, and how she felt really heard and understood. That's an emotional story. Now, that's not to be confused with being manipulative. Emotional stories are true, and you hold them with respect. But what that means is, if I'm in that situation, if I know someone in that situation, I'm going to immediately emotionally connect to Melita more so than any other real estate agent because she gets me. And you can basically just, boil everything I'm saying about epic storytelling down into, do you get me? Do you catch my attention? Do you get me? So we have personal, relevant, and emotive. Another awesome example of emotive, by the way, is I was watching another video and it was a property summary. And the person who was doing it said, can you imagine waking up to the sound of waves crashing on the shore? And he actually had the sound of waves crashing on the shore over the top of this video. And I was just sat there in front of my laptop going, yes, yes I can, yes I can. That's emotive. That's emotive storytelling. That's not functional, that's not technical, it's emotive. Another awesome example of this outside of the real estate industry is Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. And most of you should remember that. So after decades of campaigning by the science community, the most prominent minds in the science community, to try and explain to us what was happening with climate change, to try and give us the facts and information, to try and get us to make change, nothing had happened. Now Al Gore steps in and he does one presentation, one epic story that was personal, relevant and emotive. And everywhere that story was played, everywhere that presentation was played, the number of voluntary carbon offsets went up by 50%. So 50% of people started purchasing vouchers to offset their carbon footprint. That's actual action, and that's the other thing about epic storytelling. One is you want to make an impact. You want the right people to go, you get me. But more important than any of that, you want them to actually do something, right? You want them to take action. And storytelling is the best way to do that. So, power of epic storytelling. Again, I want you to look at your meetings now. Let's make this practical. Look at your meetings. I want you to have a story bank. I want you to make it part of your agenda. What stories have you heard this week? What conversations have you heard this week? What questions were you asked this week? Has anyone read any interesting articles? Has anyone, give different people different jobs around content? And then put together your content plan in the most powerful and impactful way that you can. But you need to turn on your radars if you're going to succeed at epic storytelling. I love this quote. This is by a guy called Billy Rose. Billy Rose runs The Agency. It's called The Agency in LA. And I met Billy Rose a few years ago. And he has since gone on to be a phenomenon. I think The Agency did $2 billion in sales last year with only 150 agents. So per head, that puts him streets ahead of any other agency in America. And when asked the secret to his success, he said this. He said, "We do not sell real estate. We are lifestyle storytellers." Lifestyle storytellers. So I want you to adopt that mindset because obviously it's something that pays off. So, in conclusion on this point, what stories are you telling about the area in which you live? What stories are you telling about the homes that you're listing? What stories are you telling about the people in your community? What stories are you telling about your past clients? What stories are you telling about you and your team? You need to become the mayor of content for your space, the mayor of content. And you need to put systems and procedures and intentions in place to make sure that that happens. Next on the list is collaboration. And I think this is, again, one of the most underutilized tools when it comes to influence. Collaboration essentially means finding the people who already have the eyes and the ears of the people that you're trying to target. There are 3 different ways of developing influence, 3 different platforms. One is owned, an owned platform, a website, a YouTube channel, basically something that belongs to you, where you drive traffic to. The other one is paid, and I think that too much attention gets to paid platforms. They can be very effective. Facebook advertising, Google AdWords can be very effective, but if you're starting out especially, they can also sink a lot of money before you figure out what works and what doesn't. So I wouldn't suggest you start there. Where I would suggest you start is once you've got owned nailed, once you've got your website, once you've got your channels in place, access channels. And access channels is collaboration. Again, who has the eyes and ears of the people that you're trying to reach. A good friend of mine has a magazine, and when she was first getting the magazine out onto the market, she did something incredibly smart, and she put some of the country's leading bloggers on the front cover. Now, she did that for a few reasons. One is because they have amazing stories, and she wanted to profile them. The other is that bloggers are the new celebrities, so it looked very different on the shelves, more so than your average celebrity face. But there's another reason that she did it. And she did it because those bloggers, they have a network that far surpasses her own. And when they were on the front cover, they went out and they shared that front cover amongst their networks. And they did that because they weren't competing with that magazine, and they had a similar ethos and beliefs to that magazine, shared similar values, and they wanted to make a contribution to their network by saying, hey, did you know this magazine exists? Check it out. So it works on every level, but it also got word out there. So everybody won. So I want you to think about who can you collaborate with in your environment, in your space? Who has the access channels that you want to tap into? When I was doing my research, I came across this particular lady that I love. Her name is Gia Lee. And Gia started her real estate business in 2015. And she did what seems to be the normal way of doing things, which is she got some flyers made and she hit the streets. And she went house after house after house, putting flyers in letterbox after letterbox after letterbox, until eventually she opened one letterbox and she went to put a flyer in, and she noticed that there were 7 other flyers in that letterbox, 7 others that looked exactly the same as hers. And so she packed up her flyers and she went home and she sat down and she thought, there's got to be a smarter way to stand out, because I'm just not going to be able to do it this way. And she came up with what I think is a genius idea. She came up with a blog. She started a blog and she called it Perthspective. She's based in Perth. And she went out there and she found the entrepreneurs, the leading entrepreneurs and leaders and business owners in her community. And she interviewed them. She interviewed them about their journey, their successes, their failures, why they love the area that they live in. What are some of the things they love to do in that area? And she put it all on this blog. And she started getting some great traction to the blog. She became the mayor of content in that town. But here's what's better. Those leaders, they shared it. They shared it amongst their networks, because that's what you do when someone writes an article on you, right? You share it amongst everybody you know. Again, the amplification effect of that was massive. It went on to be an event. She started holding it as an event, Perthspective. So she figured out the art of collaboration. She figured out the art of contribution. She figured out the art of clarity. And she consistently showed up and did what she needed to do to get attention, to provide value, and to make sure that it was so good that people were willing to share it. So that's collaboration. Where are the eyes and ears of the people that you want to target? How do you have access in non-competing areas? And how do you create content that's epic enough for people to share? Finally, on my list is consistency. All of this takes work. And I see, as part of my business, part of my world, I see way too many people buying into stories online, especially Facebook adverts, about, you know that person who 3 weeks ago was living in his parents' basement and now he has a New York loft apartment and a Harley Davidson behind him and he's making billions of dollars a week. It doesn't happen. I've never seen it happen. I've never known it to happen. Influence only shows up when we show up consistently, over time, providing more value and out-contributing everybody else in the marketplace. It only shows up when we show up. So you need to get consistent. There are a few keys to being consistent. The first key is you cannot consistently show up as somebody else. You can't do it. Well, you can, but I can promise you it will be joyless. It will probably not have much of an impact because we can smell that stuff out now. We've got a good nose for bullshit. Not only that, it will burn you out. Trying to be somebody else all day, every day that looks good in a photo will burn you out. So you need to be you. You can only be consistently you. So an amplified version of you, absolutely. The best version of you, the most contributing version of you, sure, but still you. I don't know if you noticed that, you know, Melita and Billy Rose and Gia Lee, they're all different, right? They're all different. They're all themselves, but amplified versions of themselves. So be you. Second key to consistency is you need to have systems in place that help you show up. So it needs to be part of your meeting agendas. I've mentioned that a few times because it's big. You need to make sure that it is hardwired into your processes, this stuff. What's in your schedule? Do you have an hour aside for dark social? Do you have ways of capturing the stories and ideas from your team? Fascinatingly, one of the things I learned recently is that the combined network, the combined influence of the people within an organization is 600 times larger than the network of the organization itself. And yet only 2% of people ever share any company content, 2% of employees. That is the largest waste, scary waste of potential I have ever heard. So who can you co-create with out of your team, where you can get their ideas, help amplify their ideas, provide the platform in a way that they will willingly share it because they co-created it. You've already got so much passion, expertise, and network within your walls. Start there. Start tapping into that. So you need to get systems and procedures in place to make this stuff happen. One of the smartest ways I know of doing this stuff is to develop what's called cornerstone content. Now, cornerstone content is where once a quarter, twice a year, however you want to do it, you bulk out a day or half a day. And you do a big chunky bit of content. It could be a trends report, it could be you video interview a whole bunch of people in your area. It could be anything you want it to be, but whatever it is, make it of value. And then for the rest of the time, chunk that down. Turn those videos into a podcast. Just take the audio, put it out on a podcast. Take those videos, chop them down into articles. Take those articles, chop them down into social media posts. Juice everything that you do. So high quality content infrequently, and then you juice it. Third thing with consistency is getting match fit. On that slide is my personal trainer. Her name's Bibiana Yip, and she's incredible. And she taught me a lot about showing up and being match fit. And the thing that she taught me is that you don't show up just to title fights. You show up every single day and you get better. And so if you're frightened of doing video, I want you to do 1 minute every morning, and I know someone that's done this, every morning, I don't care if it's in your boxer shorts. Prop your iPhone up against the wall, you make a video every morning for a week, a month. Don't send it anywhere, just get comfortable. If you're no good at writing, get a copywriter. Record your ideas, get somebody else to put them together. There are ways and means of doing this stuff. If you don't like presenting, get a coach. Just get match fit. Make sure that you identify your gaps and you fill them. So that's being match fit. Those are the cores to consistency. Now, my contribution to you, I have a contribution for you. I wrote a white paper recently. It's called the Influencer Code. It contains all 7 of the areas. We've only focused on 5 today. It's not been launched yet. It's not on my website. You won't find it anywhere. I've literally just finished it, and I want to offer it to you as my contribution. So if you text this number, if you text it with your email address, it should hopefully arrive with you literally within minutes. So as my contribution to you being match fit, to you showing up consistently, maybe take that to your next meeting, sit down, go through it with the team, and maybe come up with some ideas together about how you can use it. I really hope that you take as much of this as possible and put it into action. I can't tell you with any more conviction about how the next realm of real estate agents, the next realm of successes from a business point of view will be those that nail this, those that become the go-to authority in their space and use the platforms available to them to shine. Because as I said, we don't follow brands anymore, we follow people. And I would really love for you to be to be that person. So that's the end of my webinar. I'm just going to do a quick time check. Nope. Okay, so we're all out of time now. The very best of luck. Very best of luck with your journey. If you do have any additional questions, send them, put them in the comments, and we'll see if we can find a way or a space for me to be able to get some answers to you. Have a lovely rest of your day.